Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show
we are rerunning an episode with Lindsay Buroker.
Yes, we are. We know how much you guys miss Lindsay and her podcast. And so we decided we would rerun this episode for y'all.
Yeah. So she did the Six-Figure Author podcast until very recently. And I know that was a must listen for a lot of people. So we thought we would rerun this one. And she talks about using pen names and podcasting for authors, in fact, and also about how she releases, which is a little bit different. She releases into KU and leaves her books in there for a while and then releases them wide later. So anyway, good interview, and we're excited to share it again.
Yeah, we are. So I have no news other than I've been a little sick, but Sara has news. So Sara?
Well, I'm back from London. Yeah, I'm back from London. I went to SPS for the second day, and that was great to see some writers that I knew online, but not in person. Got to meet them and connect with them. And then I got to meet so many people who listened to the podcast. That was just so much fun, and really enjoyed that. And then I spent several days in London on my own after that. And I went to the British Library and I found some research stuff there. And then I went to visit some stately homes and went to see a play, did all kinds of stuff. I went to go see The Mousetrap. It's like the longest running play. And it was really good. Yeah. It was one of those that I kind of wished I had closed captions, because like now I listen to everything. When I watch anything on TV, I turn on to help me catch all the little details. And they speak so quickly, but it was good. It was good. Especially if you like mysteries or Agatha Christie, definitely go see it. So that was cool. And
I definitely do.
Yeah. So I'm really glad I went, came back, tested positive for COVID. And it had been so long since I've been long enough that I think everybody who was at the conference was in the clear. So I don't think I gave it or got it from anyone there, but, I've done like nothing since I got back. I'm feeling better now, but basically I've laid around for several days and done nothing. So hopefully I'll get back into the groove next week. Oh, but I did have one thing I wanted to share that might be helpful if you're traveling. I tried this app called Timeshifter, and basically you put in where you are, where you're going, your flight information, and it creates this little schedule to help you transition so that you have a better experience when you arrive. You're not so jet lagged. And it really worked. I was shocked that I got up the day after I arrived and went to the conference all day, and I didn't feel, tired or sleepy or anything. So anyway, that might be helpful if you travel a lot. So,
well, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I said I didn't have any news, and I don't have any personal news, but I wanted to say that Claire Taylor's, we re-aired her episode 2 weeks ago, and she has the Kickstarter on Reclaim Your Author Career, and it has funded, over and above.
And it funded in like 20 minutes or something crazy like that, or like under an hour or something.
Yeah, she's at 160 backers. So if you guys want to check that out, we can put that link in the podcast. In the show notes. If you missed that, you can go back and listen to her episode. And we're going to have her back on to talk about kind of new stuff too. But I just was so happy for her, and people are so excited about this Kickstarter. So I just wanted to share it again.
And it's also
obviously Con. You can still. Oh, go ahead. We don't have our video on, y'all, because our internet's horrible, and we just talk over each other all the time. So sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Kickstarter thing. It's just amazing that it obviously it works. And if you, are at all interested, just go back and listen to Russell and Monica's interview about Kickstarter, and because they have great tips. So I'm sorry, go ahead about Anchors.
Their book is awesome. No, it's fun, and their book is awesome too. Yeah, we it's just been amazing to watch people just really kill it with Kickstarter. Brian Cohen just had a really successful one too. No, what I was going to say about Anchors, there's still a chance to get the $50 off if you use the code from us, Jami 22, and it's JAMI 22, all caps. And we can have that link in the show notes as well. Yeah, I think that's all. I'm recording tomorrow for Becca Symes' conference, her strengths conference, about launching. So we're going to do like a little interview style thing, and that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that. And but that's about all I've got going on. So
okay, well, we will get on with the interview then, and we'll have all those links in the notes. So if anyone's interested.
Yep. Enjoy Lindsay.
All right, here we go. Lindsay Buroker is a full-time independent fantasy author who loves travel, hiking, tennis, and Vishlas. She grew up in Seattle area, but has itchy feet and moves every couple of years. So today we have Lindsay Buroker with us. Hello, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, and it's good to be here.
Thanks. I'm glad you're here.
We're excited to talk to you. We've talked to a lot of romance and mystery authors, and now we want to kind of add in some sci-fi and fantasy. So
yeah.
All right. Sounds good. I'll be your token geek.
Perfect.
Yeah. That's great. So can you start us out and tell us what genres you write in? I know you have a lot going on.
Right. Almost everything is under sci-fi and fantasy. I've strayed occasionally and written stuff that didn't sell because I wasn't committed to it. But I write mostly, you would call it maybe steampunk / epic fantasy, somewhere in that area. And then I also do space opera, kind of like Firefly and Star Wars. And I have a pen name I haven't published anything for a couple years on, but she does sci-fi romance. So the naughtier bits, so I can hang with your romance people a little bit. And I'm doing an urban fantasy series right now, so I've been jumping around a bit under the umbrella of sci-fi and fantasy.
Have you published the urban fantasy, or you?
I have. There's 3 of them out. I decided to launch it right into COVID-19. I mean, I didn't. I had plans, and then this virus came along. So it's a perfect time to launch a series.
Yeah,
why not?
Exactly. Well, that does make me feel better, because I have a series that I want to launch, but I was sort of wondering, should I wait or just go ahead and do it? So.
People have been very appreciative for new things to read, so there's that.
At least.
I'm not sure. Sales have been okay so far. I don't know what the future will bring, but I'm a little bit glass half empty, so I'm always prepared to be properly pessimistic, and then I'm pleasantly surprised if it's not that.
If it turns out that way, that's great. Well, tell us how you got into writing.
I was an only child and read tons as a kid. Definitely an introvert too, and we did like little car trips to swim meets. I was on swim team, and I just read so many books in the back of the car going around. That's how you traveled back then, and maybe it will be again too.
Exactly.
Car trips, like nobody went on airplanes or cruise ships or anything like that. But so I grew up reading, loved it, loved making up stories for like my stuffed animals would all become characters, and but I was not very good at finishing things. I tended to start stories and write the fun parts and then wander off.
Yes.
And that continued like throughout. Finally, probably about 15 years ago now, I joined an online writing workshop, and you'd post a chapter each week or whatever. And I'd see other people finishing their books and getting agents and selling short stories. And that for me was motivating. I see other people be successful, and I think, well, I'm okay. I'm as good as they are. Maybe I could finish something too. And so I got a little more serious, and I spent a couple of years with that workshop and really learned a lot too from having my stuff critiqued and also from critiquing other people's work. It was, I don't know, I seem to learn best that way, kind of a kinetic approach rather than just reading a book or something. And I was kind of ready to seek out an agent right about the time I got my first Kindle. This was like fall of 2010. And that we started seeing some success stories then from like J.A. Conrath and Amanda Hawking back in those days. And I pretty quickly went from like, hey, I didn't think I was really going to get an agent anyway because I wasn't writing the kind of stuff they were asking for. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm just going to go all in and do this self-publishing thing. And it's been almost 10 years now, and I haven't counted how many books I have out. It's probably 60 or 70 novels and then a bunch of shorter stuff. But been full-time since 2012, I'd say, early 2012. I was self-employed before, so it was kind of a gradual transition rather than just quitting the day job. But I'd sort of checked out of the other work well before. So
I think that's very common.
Yeah. Your just brain's like, "Ooh, look, I was excited to make like $100." I was like, if I can make $100 from my books, I can make more. So we can do this.
Right. I think you. I tell this. In fact, I said it when we interviewed Jay Thorne that he was telling the story about when he decided to go full time, and y'all were in New Orleans, you and Joanna and Jay and Zach, and something was said to the effect of, well, what if I don't have enough money? And you were like, you just make more money. And I was like, that is genius. And I have held on to that it may not even have been the right quote, but for me, I'm just like, yeah, I'll just make more money. That's what you do. You just make more money. So you can make $100, you can make $1,000.
Right. And I had come from being self-employed for since 2001 or so. Yeah. So I had already sort of embraced that entrepreneurial mindset, even though as an introvert, I find some of that stuff very hard. I can't sell anything, hard sell anything to anyone. But, I'd seen well, if you could start another series or, try some nonfiction like those guys do, the nonfiction also, I think, or at least the courses and the get-togethers that we will not be getting together for, but virtually, I think we're still getting together.
That'll be good. Yeah.
Career Author Summit. Yeah. So there's always opportunities, always more things you can do if something's slowing down.
Yeah.
Just have that
very true
mindset of okay, I can do this. I've done it once. I can do it again.
Can do it again. Yeah.
There's so much potential. Yeah. That's the one thing about being indie is that you have so much freedom. In a way, it's overwhelming, but it is great because you're like, well, if that didn't work, I can change it. I can start a new series. I can do whatever. So that's really one of our big advantages. So what would you say was your first big success?
I think the first thing I did that took me past $100 a day, or not $100 a day, $100 a month was just, I figured out that you can make things free, which was not an obvious thing back in this was early 2011. I never did know how to do it on Amazon until a year later, but I put out a short story that I had originally written for an anthology that was rejected, but it tied into my main series that had one book out with a second one coming. And it was because I had struggled, just getting traction selling the novels at $2.99. There was Kindle Nation Daily was the one and only sponsorship site out at that time. There was nobody doing Facebook ads. There were no Amazon ads. So it's funny because we talk about it as the gold rush days, but it was actually pretty hard to gain visibility. And then I didn't have awesome covers or, I didn't know what I was doing. And back then you had to go find somebody on DeviantArt. There were no, there wasn't this whole industry of cover design. So, but anyway, I made that story free, and it really highlighted the main characters and showed their banter and that they were fun. And I was like, oh, and by the way, if you want to see how these characters met, here's a preview to book one in the back of the short story. And so making that free out there on Barnes & Noble, and I think it was probably Apple and the other stores, I was with Smashwords then, was sort of the first thing I did that started bringing in sales of the first novel in that series. And then I published more in the series. Eventually, I learned how to do the price matching and get Amazon to make book one free. And things have been going, I wasn't a huge thing. It wasn't I was suddenly making $1 million, but it was sort of the first thing that helped. And I'm still today a very big proponent of giving stuff away for free, sort of the free samples at Costco, here's this yummy cheese and, you want to buy the rest of the yummy cheese over in this block for $29 because it's luxury yummy cheese. So,
yeah. So are you all wide or are you some wide and some KU?
I am all my backlist is wide, and then it's usually sort of the last, the current series and the last series are in Kindle Unlimited. I'm not a big fan of the exclusivity, like most authors, I think will admit that.
Yeah.
But I definitely have seen that it was very hard to launch new series and compete with books that were in Kindle Unlimited, since I'm sure you've talked about how borrows count as sales as far as ranking and visibility goes on Amazon. So I kind of caved and gave in, at least for now. I'm launching things. So indicate you for new stuff. I do a Patreon also, so that readers can get I'll pre-launch there a couple weeks before I launch the series. And that does give, some of the Barnes & Noble and Kobo readers and Apple a chance to get them early, so they're not like punished and have to wait 2 years, which it's something I struggle with. I want to make as much money as I can from my series and get it in the hands of as many people. But because I started wide, I do have all these readers on the other platforms still that get grumpy if, understandably, if the books aren't available for them. So it's And
that pre-order thing works well. You that's been working well for you. As far as
it does fine. I've got, I think, maybe like 200 or 250 people that do that. Oh, wow. Some people won't because it's too many steps. It's book funnel and it's not automatically landing on their device. And I understand, but at least I have the option for them. Right. So, and hey, it's another place I get money besides Amazon. So I always figure if anything happened over here, I could ramp this up over here. Right. Right now as we're recording, audiobooks are really delayed with ACX. And so I'm kind of looking around like, how could I just, release the audiobooks? I'm waiting for BookFunnel to hopefully make a delivery system for that as a way to sell direct as another option for those.
Yeah, and you're in touch with the Patreon people. You have connection with them where you wouldn't have it through Amazon or Kobo. So that's good too. It's like you can keep up with them.
And those are some of the best, these are people that will pay $5, $10 every time you publish something. I think I even have a couple that pay $25, even though I specifically say, don't do this. and I have it so they can do it if they want to once in a while, but there's a couple of people on there. And they tend to be the least, the lowest maintenance customers. So I'm I always know that they're just chill. I don't know. There's something nice about people who are willing to pay a little more for your stuff. They seem to, for whatever reason, they seem to be easier to deal with than some of the customer service stuff you get from why aren't all your books in Kindle Unlimited? And I've written a blog post at this point that explains it, that I can send it to them about the exclusivity and that being a problem and stuff. And I'm like, well, you need to email Amazon and ask them why they did the exclusivity.
Exactly.
Not me.
That's not us. Yeah, exactly. Well, tell us what you wish you'd known about writing and craft when you first started.
I think, I'm glad I did the workshop, actually. I'm not sure. I feel like by the time I actually published a couple books, I'd sort of gone through. I'd sold some short stories to anthologies and some of the lower rung magazines. I never could get those fancy pro magazines to want my stuff. But I actually think that that's something that I'm glad that happened. That I had that couple years of learning, because now it's so easy for new writers just to go I can self-publish, get it right on Amazon and start rolling along. And I think if my first stuff had gone up before I'd gotten feedback from other writers, I always say, if you can please other writers, that's the hardest group of people is writers and editors. They're always harder on you than just fans that don't necessarily care as much about if you're doing dangling modifiers or if you're info dumping on page 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not saying I was just so smart and patient to do that stuff first, but just because I was a little earlier in the e-reader movement, I had to do those things because I thought the only route at that time was going to be traditional publishing. Right. So I'm glad for that. Yeah. So I don't know that. I guess I guess what I wish I had known back then, I don't know. I feel like because I had to go that way, I was pretty solid when I first launched. My first book isn't perfect. Nobody's is. But I'm glad it wasn't my first book I'd ever written.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Same thing happened to me. But that was only in 2016. 14 or so that I started, kind of going to RWA and get involved with the critique group and stuff, but I still thought that traditional publishing was the only route. And so I was going to critique groups and getting my stuff just ripped apart and, in a good way, not a bad way, but it taught me so much that when it came time and I realized I could self-publish, what I really had to learn was the business, not writing in the business. And so that I agree. I think that there's some benefit to that, because I would have been crucified if I had put up my first stuff, for sure. There were modifiers dangling everywhere in that first thing. Yeah.
No, you don't know what you don't know until
you don't know what you don't know.
I thought my stuff was delightful. I'd been, I was like, I was a reader since like age 3. Of course, my stuff will be fantastic. I will say one of the early craft things I learned from the workshop and from critiquing other people is that you don't necessarily have to fill all the time. Like I learned about scene breaks, like stop when the important stuff happens. You don't have to show I read all those books, early America, like taking the covered wagon across the country.
Yes.
Like, you don't have to show the entire trip across the country and fill all the time.
Yes. So describing every tumbleweed that goes by.
So like travel scenes, I learned to cut almost all travel scenes unless like an attack is imminent or something.
Yes, exactly. So we're just going to end up there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pacing is tough. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. So switching to the other thing we all have to worry about is like marketing. So what do you wish you had known about marketing and publicity and things like that?
I think the thing early on that I might have had a little more success more quickly would have been if I'd had the covers really nailed down. And part of it was, like I said, there wasn't really an industry back then of cover designers. So you were kind of figuring it out on your own. Like the first guy I did some cool artwork, but he couldn't do the typography. And I didn't know how to do like typography. So I had this weird, like painted red. I don't know what you would call it, if it was even a font or what. But so I think because I have no graphic design background and no skills in that department whatsoever. So that was a little bit of a weakness for me. I think it was probably a few years before I started finding, there were more cover designers to pick from and finding some people to, I still have some that I'm like, why was the art so much better for that other book you did? And then for my book, I'm like, is it me? It's probably me. I probably did not explain well or tried to over-explain or something. So I would say the cover art has been one of the things where I wish I had got that dialed in earlier on. Because it's people will try a free book with a doofy cover, but way more people will try a free book with an amazing cover.
Yes,
exactly. I think that's
covers
so
will
hard.
Sell. Yeah.
I think that's so hard because like I don't know how to talk to an artist because I'm not an artist, but my daughter is, and so I'll go talk to her and I'll say, "This is what I got. How do I speak to my cover artist?" And she'll tell me, "Say you want to say this," which I just don't know how to do that. So I think that's really challenging.
I knew nothing about cover design when I started, and it was hard. I didn't know what a cover designer could do, and they can do just about anything, but I didn't know that. So
yeah, and coming out of the reading community too, you've probably had a lot of people say like the characters didn't look right on that cover; they're horrible, and you probably felt that too. And so you want them to be just right when it's your turn to do it. I've since realized that I get a lot better covers when I'm just like, hey, make something cool. It's space opera, put a starship on it, I think that hopefully the artists get excited too when you're just like, make something cool. And it sort of ties in with the story, but not worrying about like, did you get the eye color right?
Right. My cover designer, we worked on the first one. It was a couple of months, and because I didn't know she could change hair color. I just didn't know she could do those things. And so I kept going, no, do it this way. And finally, we took a break over the holidays. And when we came back, I sent her an email and I said, listen, you're the professional, so I'm just going to let you handle it. And she messaged back, oh, thank God.
Finally.
She was trying to be, accommodating, but she was like, just let me put some things together and we'll see how that goes. And it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. But as soon as I let go of the reins and let the professional do what they do, then I got a great cover. But it's hard. So what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your career, and then looking back, were they right or wrong?
I think one assumption I made was that I could write, like, I always knew, like, I'm not the greatest plotter, you know, I'm only mediocre at setting scene and world building, but I loved writing banter and creating characters that I enjoyed spending time with. So I had the assumption, you know, having had a few short stories and things published at that point, I was like, I think the writing itself is good enough. You know, maybe it's not the greatest thing out there, but I really think that if I get these characters out there and get enough people to try my stories, even if they don't fall neatly into like one category on Amazon, which I didn't really know was a problem yet then, you know, I thought people would be loyal to the characters in the series and want to keep reading. And that assumption actually turned out to be true. I think I've learned more. Like I said, I've learned I'm not the greatest plotter. I'm not the person who's going to have like surprise twists that delight and amaze people, because I apparently can't do that. So I've learned more of the things I'm not that great at, but I have learned that I was right about that initial thing, that I like to do banter, I like to do characters, and people really get attached to the characters. And that, you know, they've told me, like, I wish I could hang out with these guys. I wish we could have them over for the family barbecue. So I've leaned into that, and I've tried to improve a little bit at the other things too, but I've kind of accepted that, like, all right, if I have 5 pages of dialogue in a row, it's probably okay, because as long as it's moving the plot forward, I think my readers will enjoy it.
Yeah. I think that's really true. Like I write mystery, so plot is so important, and I've learned over the years that the characters are even more important than the plot. I mean, you have to have a good plot, but readers will come back for the characters from book to book. So I think that's really key. Yeah. So have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be a good thing? One of the tougher questions.
Yeah, I think I would say, I'm not sure I would call my whole career early on a mistake, but before I started paying attention to like marketing and what was, you know, learning that, oh, you actually want to write books that are like all the other books in a category on Amazon, and maybe with your unique twist. Because I was coming out of like, agents were saying, like, we're tired of that. We don't want to see any more Tolkien kind of fantasy. We don't want to see anything like Dungeons and Dragons. I was like, oh man, I like that stuff. So I intentionally wrote stuff that wasn't really to those tropes, and it had those types of characters in the beginning. And, you know, I think that first series I wrote, The Emperor's Edge, which also I learned that you should not title the series after the name of the first book. You should actually have a series title later on. But I think that because I came out of that with that mindset, let's try to write something different versus like everything else. I ended up with a story it's not, you know, now I've written other things that have sold more because they have some more of those popular elements, like in fantasy, epic fantasy dragons are popular. And I have a series now with dragons that did really well. But the fans really connected with the characters in that first series. And even though it didn't have a lot of the, you know, popular tropey stuff from epic fantasy, it's been a fan favorite, and I've had like a lot of fan art and fan fiction for that series. So I didn't really know what I was doing other than I want to write something I enjoy with characters I like. And so I don't know if I'd call it a mistake, but it was definitely, I was less educated on anything marketing, anything what sells, you know, I was just doing what I wanted to write. And I'm glad I did that for my first series. And maybe, you know, it sold fine. It was what led to me becoming a full-time author eventually. But it wasn't like I didn't sell 1 million copies and become the next Amanda Hawking. And I don't know if I would have, even if I had known more about marketing then.
Right.
But it was good. I think the first couple of series, I was just trying to write what I enjoy, and that ended up getting me some really loyal fans that I still have today.
I think that's an important point, though, because people always say, you know, be careful about writing what you love because you want to write to market too. But if you're a reader and you read what you read in the genre you write in, or you read in the genre you now write in, that you can write the book you love. I mean, you can write that book of your heart because it's what you would have wanted to read as a reader. And so, yeah, I think that does work out for some people, but it irritates me when people don't read in the genre they try to write in because it's a popular genre. And I don't think they always hit the mark because they're not lovers of the genre. You know,
I don't know how people can do that. Like I was never a big urban fantasy fan, so before I started this series, I was like, crud, I gotta like read a bunch of them to make sure. I just wanted to write a story about a character set in modern times. I wasn't really thinking like, oh, I gotta like nail urban fantasy because that's what this is going to be categorized as, but I still went out and read a whole bunch of book ones because I was hoping I could find that there's some stuff vaguely selling that was somewhere in line with what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I would have adjusted my story much. I am a little bit stubborn about writing it has to be what I'm excited about. And I tend not to be somebody that likes the real popular stuff.
Yeah.
Not because I'm a snob. I mean, I'm a snob, of course, but not because there's like no value in that stuff. It just, for some reason, I never have connected with like the popular stuff.
Yeah.
You know? I was the little girl watching Star Trek reruns with my mom, you know, not playing House or watching Full House or whatever it was on back then. So
that's awesome.
Quirky.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's what I like to think of it as. I'm quirky. I'm not in the mainstream. I'm kind of a little off, but I'm okay. It's quirky.
So have you ever had anything that you thought, oh, this is a home run, this is gonna be it, and then it turned out not to be?
Yes, it never is. It's like let's see, I thought Chains of Honor was my series that I had like a really cool cover artist, Gene Mullica, and the covers are amazing. And I thought it was very much like kind of a sort of, I guess he was kind of orphaned. You know, he had to like, the hero's young, like an 18-year-old character, which in epic fantasy, there's like this trope where like the orphan boy saves the world and is a prophesied one. And it was as close as I'd come to following the tropes of epic fantasy. I was like, this is going to be awesome. This is going to sell like crazy. And it did okay. You know, I mean, I'm fortunate that I do have fans that will read anything, which is awesome.
Yes.
But it definitely didn't like kill it.
Yeah.
And with this urban fantasy too, I was like, well, I'm bringing dragons in to urban fantasy. They're awesome in epic fantasy, so maybe they'll be awesome in urban fantasy. And it's done okay, but I've spent more money on it than I did like to launch any of the last 3 series I've had, and it hasn't made more. So I'm like, well, so I should learn not to just have any expectations.
Yeah.
But I think even after you've written a lot of series, you're always kind of hoping maybe this will be the one. This will be so awesome, and they'll want to make movies out of it, and somebody will want to pay me lots of money, and I'll be retired at that point and can write whatever. But I should just not have expectations. That's hard.
Yeah. It is. It's very hard.
You always have hopes.
Yeah, you do. Even if they're just secret little hopes, you know.
Right. You tell everybody, nah, it probably won't be that great. Yeah, and that's exactly what I did with urban fantasy. I was like, well, I'm jumping into this new subgenre that I haven't written in, so it probably won't do that well. But secretly, I'm like, well, maybe the time for dragons has come.
Maybe we need that trend. Yeah.
Exactly. That's so funny.
So is there anything you've stopped doing, tasks or goals or things that you've taken off your plate over the years that you've decided that's just not really worth my time?
I think a lot of the marketing stuff that comes and goes, you know, I've tried like Facebook events and I've joined other people's parties and this ends up being kind of a time commitment. And since I write fairly quickly, you know, it doesn't really take me that many hours total to write a book. So if I take 2 hours out here, 2 hours out there, you know, before long, that's a book I could have written. And, you know, some of those I've not really seen the needle move. So I've sort of started saying, I'm trying to be better about saying no to things, which can be hard because you guys know that you have a podcast, you'll be more likely to be approached for things, which can be good, especially if you're not the kind of person that wants to go out and approach people and network and stuff. But, you know, I've just tried to do fewer of the things that I've done. I'll try anything once. And if it doesn't really kill it, you know, then I'm like, nah, I don't think I need to do that again. I'd rather, because I love the writing. That's my favorite thing. The marketing is the things I have to do in order to sell the writing. But it's not like, ooh, I'm so excited to make some new Amazon ads this week. It's more like, Amazon ads time.
Yeah. I know. Those are, they are at times like, but I actually like the marketing because I'm not risk averse. And so it's like putting money in a slot machine and pulling the handle, because a lot of times they work. They don't work a lot of times too, but you just never know. And for me, I love that part, but for a lot of people that it's not that fun. I get it.
I've become a big fan of things that you can do once and that continue to sell books for you. That's why I'm still a fan of a perma-free book one in a series, because I'll completely ignore something for a year and then I'll go in and it's like, oh, there's still like 100 downloads a day of that book, you know, and then the series is still selling even though I haven't got a book club forever or, or anything big. I do try to cycle through and get some promos and stuff for my book ones every now and then. But that's one of the things that's just been easy. All I had to do is drop the price. And that continues to help the backlist stuff continue to sell.
Do you rotate the free books, or is it usually just the first book in the series?
I've got a couple series where it's just book one's always free. It's been free so long that they're like on Scribd and places I've forgotten. So it would be really difficult to go and find all the spots where that book is free. So I've got a couple like that. And then I do rotate with a couple of the other series. I have like a 3-book box set. There's 3 in my Dragon Blood series right now. That's one that always has been popular. So I leave that one free until I'm like, I want to try to get a book club. And so I'll put it up to $4.99 for a few months. And then they seem to always take that one. And even though it's a little bit diminishing returns on books that have been featured year after year on there, if I can get one, I'll still take it. It's still a nice boost. But I'll kind of rotate sometimes. Some things I've made, like I just did a complete series free for my newsletter, just because I'm like, hey guys, if you lost your job or something right now or money's tight and you don't want to buy my new book at $5, here's also, I've made this box set of this complete series free just for you guys. And
that's nice.
That too. Yeah.
That's really great. So, what do you wish you'd known about writing in multiple genres and like using pen names? And do you recommend using pen names?
I think I'm not sure I wish I'd known it because then I wouldn't have done it. But I probably did not realize early on that the best way to make have a really good devoted fan base and sell really well with every new series you do is to always write in the same genre and always kind of give your readers what they want more of.
Right.
Jumping to different genres, even within the realm of sci-fi and fantasy, I've definitely found like there's people that do epic fantasy that don't want to touch the space opera stuff. Even within fantasy, they may do epic fantasy but not be interested in the contemporary urban fantasy. So I would probably tell other people, if you want to make money, just focus for a while on one genre and write a couple series and really know it and get established in it. And then maybe you can try something else. So that's one thing I've learned is that I've kind of picked a harder road than necessary. And then with pen names, I chose it. I felt I had to because the sex on the page was a big departure for me. Like the first series I wrote where I had like a little teeny love scene, I got some flack from readers. My first series was more PG, and they were kind of like, "What is going on? They're having sex in a cave. They just met like in this book."
They're going, no,
romance, fantasy romance. So at that point, I just decided all the naughty stuff, for the most part, would go off under the pen name. But I've definitely learned that it's a lot of work to maintain 2 names, to do. And I don't anymore. Like I've kind of dropped the website and the social media pages and stuff for the pen name. So that's something for people to consider if they're planning to do a pen name and their regular name. Are you going to keep publishing in both names? Even if you're quite prolific, it's hard to really keep 2 going. I found, I like to focus on one series at a time. So that would mean leaving my regular name with nothing new out for almost a year while I go over and publish a new series under the pen name. So it's a little harder to keep things selling. And then when you're releasing new books as a pen name, that will help your backlist, but only your backlist for your pen name, and vice versa. Whereas if everything's under one name and you have a series that's selling well, a new series, you'll get people trickling back and trying their older stuff. But unless you eventually go the route, and I've thought of this, of putting both names on the cover and claiming both authors, and just maybe making a disclaimer like, hey, naughty bits in the...
Yeah, exactly.
Don't read if that's not for you. So that's something that I may do someday, and just... Because I'm very, I enjoyed the stories that I wrote under the pen name. I didn't use it as a way to, like, some people I've heard just like, well, I'm just going to knock these out and put out okay, mediocre stories, and hope they sell because this isn't a hot genre. I was very much just, they're still my stories. They're just with sex.
Yeah, exactly. I read a book the other day, and it said she dedicated it to her dad and, how great he was. And then she said, but Dad, don't read chapters 5, 12, 14, and 30, 30 or something like that. I thought it was hilarious.
She's got 4 cave scenes.
Yeah, she went for it. But I think this is important, though, for our listeners because Lindsay is crazy prolific. Like she just said, I mean, she can write a book really fast. But even you find it hard to write under two names and get books out as fast as your readers want them to be out.
And then doing all the marketing for both names too. It's like that's if I was just if I had a full-time publisher or something and I was just doing the writing, maybe it'd be okay. But I've found too, as I've written more and more series, that it's really hard if I start jumping around. My brain works much better if I write books 1 through 8 back to back. I don't always obey my brain, but for the most part, I've learned to mostly do that because otherwise I end up where I have to go reread like the first 6 books if it's been a while since I did an installment in that series, and that takes a lot of time. I'm not a fast reader. For some reason I can write quickly, but I'm not like one of those, I read 2 books a day. Even when I was a kid, I might have read 1 a day, but what are you doing as a kid? You're in the back of the station wagon on a road trip.
What else do you have to do?
But,
you got time.
There was no other entertainment back then. It was like the one station that came in on the radio that your dad claimed. So
exactly.
That's what makes me tired just thinking about it, and I haven't ever tried a pen name. So not only do you write a whole bunch of series, you also do podcasting. So we wanted to talk to you about podcasting and any advice you have, anything that you wish you had known about podcasting, in particular, if there's writers out there that are thinking of starting a podcast. And like ours is more directed to writers and yours is too, but just whether.
Which is the 6-Figure Author Podcast. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing I've learned about podcasting from doing this one, and then for about 4 years, we also did the sci-fi and fantasy marketing podcast, which was super niche. And in the end, I felt like we were being a little repetitive. So that's why I was like, we can retire this one. And I almost retired completely from podcasting. But Andrea Pearson, who is one of our new co-hosts on the new show, wrote a long email with like ideas. This is what you should do when you bring the show back. I was like, well, why don't you come on board and we'll do those with the new show. But what I've learned is it doesn't really sell books. It might more so if you're selling writing, if we were selling books about writing, that'd be more of a match. But even so, I find that people are listening to their podcasts where they're walking their dogs or they're commuting. So they're not like, I can click and buy a book really easily right here. So that probably shouldn't be the main reason you start one if you're going to start one. What I have found though is that as somebody who's not at all into networking, and I'm always like, no, I can do it all by myself. I do not need any help from anyone. I'm just going to do it all by myself. And to some extent, you can get pretty far that way. But it's, especially if you're a newer author, it's easier if you can get invited to be on some joint promotions, do a 8-author multi-book box or multi-novel box set in one book thing. And everybody's promoting to their lists and that kind of thing. And it can be hard to get invited to that stuff if you're just new author, not really known in your genre yet. When you do the podcast, you have the opportunity to interview lots of people, and you also have listeners who maybe write. Some of them might write in the same genres as you do. So I found that it's a lot easier. I don't usually do the newsletter swaps, but I did when I jumped into sci-fi because that was a new genre for me, and I was really hoping to I don't know how much you've talked about also bots and all that stuff, but I think we'll assume more people know that if you're writing in multiple genres, it can get a little screwy with the also bots. And I was hoping to get sci-fi people to promote my book, and I would promote theirs. And so that was one time where I did newsletter swaps, and I found that because of the podcast, lots of people, even though I hadn't written in that genre, knew my name and were like, yes, we'd be happy to do that and happy to do a newsletter swap with you. And I've seen other people that are are newer, less well known. It's kind of crickets when they're like, hey, does anybody want to do a newsletter swap? So I think for networking in an introvert acceptable way, where you're not like schmoozing people at a conference or anything, that it's an effective way, especially if you can, over time you do it and you get more listeners and more people. So it's been good for making connections, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just like, I'm on the Enneagram, I'm a 2, which is a helper. So that this just like feels that well for me. I just love like giving information to people, from really smart people like you. So
I do too. And then if you recorded it, you don't have to say it again. You can just say, hey, we did a podcast on that. Why don't you check it out? Because you do, if you're out there, you start getting emails and questions from a lot of people. So it's nice to be able to go like, oh yeah, go check out episode 36 where we had Jami on and she writes a book a year and you're writing a book a year. So you should check out that show.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of that though, you pretty much live by the rapid release model. Is that correct? Or you try to?
Well, I have gradually over time become a quicker writer. The first series was more like a one every 6 months.
Right.
Those were also longer books too, so there was that. And now I found that between, it kind of suits me to write the first 3 novels because I'm a bit of I outline individual stories, but I'm with the world building, I'm a bit of a discover it and make stuff up as I go along. And so if I'm working on book 3 and I'm like, oh, I need this to make up a new religion and I need to plant that in book 1, it allows me to, if I had my druthers, I'd probably write an entire series before I published any of them. And then you can just focus completely over to marketing instead of trying to do both writing and marketing at one time. But because I do this full time and it's my income also, I start to income dropping this month. Time to publish something new. So, what was the question?
Well, I just
release.
Just rapid release and the benefits you see in rapid release. I mean, we've heard a lot of them, but how's it benefited you? Yeah.
From the story perspective, it lets me really iron things out a little more before I launch anything, and then I'm kind of committed, and it's harder to go back and change things at that point. And then from marketing, it seems to be helpful to if you have 3 for them to buy all at once or like one right after the other, you're kind of striking while they're still excited about the first book. I find that I get a lot better sell through earlier on. Sometimes when you put out book 4 and it's been a long time since the last one, you feel like you're starting from ground zero. Like you've got your mailing list and those people are always good, but there's, I know I have a lot of people who buy my books who aren't on my mailing list. They're never going to sign up for a mailing list. They're never going to follow a Facebook page. But so if the book's already there on pre-order, at least, they can go out and get it while they're still excited about the series. And I think with the voracious readers, I always tell people, don't assume that they read one book by you and you're now imprinted in your brain and they think they're awesome. It's like, no, they'll probably forget about you because they're reading a book every day. But once they read maybe 3, there's a little more in the memory at that point, and hopefully I've certainly found the conversion when I do a book 1 through 3 box set is much better going on to book 4 than like a book 1 onto a book 2. They've read 3. They're like, well, I'm in it now.
Yeah.
So I love to have like the first 3 come out kind of back to back. You get some really great income months then too. It's just naturally, obviously you're releasing several at once as opposed to spread out over time. And it seems to be, it adds up to more than like the individual pieces with that. And I think it's a bit momentum, a bit maybe if you're on the new release list, for a solid 2 months or whatever on Amazon, that can help too. And so I like it, but it suits me. I do get concerned when people like do write a book a year and they're like, oh my gosh, now I have to have 3 books and rapid release. And I'm like, well, no, you don't.
Yeah, I'm just living vicariously through you. I'm just listening and going, that would be so nice. Well, when you do release them, do you actually release them all at once, or is it like one a week or one every few weeks? Or
usually one every 2 to 3 weeks for the first 3, and then it'll be about one a month for the next couple. And usually at that point they've gotten longer because the series is getting longer, so I slow down a little bit. And now with my space opera series, I'm releasing book 7 coming up this month, and I took a break to do the first 4 books in the urban fantasy, which is not what I recommend, but it was just that particular series. They're all over like 150,000 words now with like 7 point of view characters. So I was like, okay, I just need to write something simple for a little bit and take a break before I go back to that. So
yeah. Well, and another thing to point out too, and I think rapid release is great, even if this isn't the case, but in like urban fantasy and epic fantasy and space opera, you're usually working with the same characters in each book. Like you've got 1 or 2 main characters and they carry through all the books. Where like in romance, we write a lot of standalones in a series. So you won't have the same characters, but you'll have relating characters. So I think that's one of the reasons I can get away with writing more slowly, because it's not like somebody's waiting to see what's going to happen to John and Mary. I didn't leave them.
Are they going to get together or not?
Yeah. Or, they, even if it's not a cliffhanger, I mean, it's still that overarching, in sci-fi and urban fantasy and stuff. You've got that overarching bad guy or whatever, and that hasn't been resolved until you finish the series. So, but still, I still think it's a great thing. If I could do it, I would do it. But
there is pressure from your readers when you've got a cliffhanger. And my sci-fi series has mad cliffhangers pretty much all the way through, because it's sort of I envision it like episodic TV.
Yeah.
It's like next week, find out.
Well, it's all that Star Trek you watched. So
it's true. But it's a good point with romance. And actually the most successful romance series I did under my pen name, it was just like a 5-book series, but I had all 5 female characters get kidnapped at the same time. And it was like an overarching story. There was a romance in each one, but the goal was to get back to Earth. And they did finally at the end of book 5. So I'm always like, if you can do something like that with romance, I know not every romance genre is going to have kidnapping.
Yeah, exactly.
Dragged off to another planet. But if
I was
you
going to say space aliens, yeah. That's exactly true. Yeah.
Very powerful to have a story and not a cliffhanger, but because I did switch couples, each one was
but that open loop, you just need that open loop.
Something to be resolved is very powerful in keeping the reader going, especially when it is. Because I know when I read romances, I'm kind of like, even if I like one and really like the characters and I like the author, but the next one sounds like those characters are less my cup of tea. There's a little more of a question mark. Whereas, if you have to see what's going on with, and you're going to get an update with the original characters too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. That was a great answer for rapid release. I mean, again, I'm a fan. It's not something I've perfected yet. So.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that I'm not as fast a writer as Lindsay, but I did take like almost a whole year and wrote the beginning of the series. It took 6 months. I wrote 2 books and then waited until they were done. And while they were being edited, I wrote the 3rd book in a new series. And then I launched them 90 days apart, because that was the longest you could do pre-order at that time. And that worked really well too, even though it was slower, but the books were wide. But that was a way, it gave me that advantage of like, this one's done, but the next one's on pre-order and readers could see that. So I think I maybe traded a little, maybe newsletter signups for pre-orders, but the same principle worked. So even if you can't release, even if you can't write super fast, you can still sort of do the same thing, but maybe modify it a little bit.
Yeah.
So that worked well for me. So that might be something people could try.
Yeah. So. Pre-order is good too. And I've had the same experience with that, just what you were saying, like the first 3 books I had out, the pre-orders were there and I just kind of directed people to get the next one and, sign up for my newsletter too. And now because things are a little weird in the world right now, I didn't put 4 up for pre-order. I want to make sure I have the cover art before I do that. So I said, well, just sign up for my newsletter and I'll let you know when it's out. And it's like, lo and behold, a whole bunch more newsletter signups than I was getting when they could just go to pre-order. So it's maybe a choice, but I do think it's good if you can have that out there.
That is interesting. Yeah.
And like I was saying, you never have to feel like you have to do that. That's why I love you, Jami, because you're like an example of someone who is successful on a novel a year. Yeah. And it's just that if that is your special thing, like you can write fast, that's one of your talents, then go ahead and embrace it. I feel like it helps a lot with the marketing. It's sort of almost in lieu of marketing in some places.
It is. I would spend a lot less on marketing if I could release a book fast. If I could release a book faster, I think, because my launches and every launch for me, and it's kind of like one of those things about, it doesn't matter if it's okay, if it launches great, but in my heart, I'm like, this has to hit. It's the only thing I've got coming out. And so for me, it puts a lot of pressure. So it would be better, but.
Well, then there's other people who are like mad spreadsheet experts that really get the ads. And so it's like, we all have our own little things, just whatever it is that is your thing and appeals to you, you can kind of focus on that and then use it to your advantage.
Exactly. And try to, like Becca Syme says, embrace your strengths and not looking
stay
at
away from those things you're not as good at.
Yeah, exactly. yeah, exactly.
So looking back, what changes have you seen in your genres as you've been writing? What changes have you seen, like in publishing, or specifically what you're writing in?
Well, of course, there's a lot more authors doing this now. So there's a lot more books in the Kindle store. It's going to take more usually than a cool cover to get your foot in the door. And, I've seen the change. Just the right to market movement wasn't really a thing. When I got started, nobody was really thinking about that. They were just writing what they wanted to write. And the people who sold really well happened to be writing to market without knowing it. So that's become a thing as a result of more competition. I think more, it's always been hard to sell quirky offbeat stories unless there's enough quirky offbeat people of that particular thing. And then that's a valid place to be. And you tend to get really hardcore fans if you are publishing something that's not widely available. But it's probably a little easier road to go to and a bigger audience potentially to, do the little more writing to a hungry market, a bigger market. So I've seen that trend come along. And of course, when I started, there was no KDP Select, no Kindle Unlimited, no exclusivity with Amazon. So I've seen that. And, I've chosen to I resisted it for a couple of years. And now I'm partially committed. Like I said, with the newer releases, I'll put them in there. So just having to adapt. And you were saying as indie authors, we have that option. Things are always changing and we can adapt and either try to take advantage or at least trying to get steamrolled over. So, because all the, categories are more crowded. Although if you watch Amazon, they do add new things. Like I started the pen name, the sci-fi romance category is quite new when I started. And at the time, this was probably late 2014 when I launched the series, the covers were really quite awful. As you can imagine, sci-fi and aliens and things is hard anyway because they're not in stock art photos. You gotta take this guy and put some horns on him and make him blue.
Exactly.
But so it was a little easier because it was a newer category and less competitive then. So if you kind of just watch when Amazon puts some new categories up or subcategories in your genre, that can be something you can take advantage of. So I just try to pay attention. It's definitely changing. I still feel that people can get started today and do okay. I do think there's a lot of pressure right now with so many podcasts talking about, or people posting their book report. I made $50,000 this month. Well, I'll probably make $50,000 when I launch my series as a new author. And I had low expectations when I got started. I was just like, I'm hoping I can get to the point where I make paper route money. I was really excited when I got to more than I was making when I was 12 from my paper route from my books.
Right. I had two bills I wanted to pay. Like there were two bills that were really stretching us. And I was like, if I could pay those two bills, then that would just like take the pressure off and I'd have my job. And that happened. But it was not like, that wasn't a lot of money. I mean, it was two bills that I was just trying to take care of, the car payment. And I can't remember what the other one was, but because I had gotten a new car, but
So if you have low expectations,
there's nowhere to go but up.
You're pleasantly surprised if you do better. And then if you just hit your expectations, that's okay too. You can just gradually over time, you write more books, you write more series, you get more readers.
Exactly. So what's the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success, do you think?
I think that I've always tried to, honestly, accidentally writing the type of characters that I love, that other people have loved. I think that's probably more key for me than like marketing brilliance. I think. I would say
think
definitely.
That's great because that's not going to change. Marketing stuff will change over time.
So I guess accidentally having done the workshop and learned the basics and proven I could sell stuff, even if it wasn't like to hugely popular magazines or anything. I learned the basics and I wasn't trying to, it's really hard to market a book that's a clunker. And it's hard to tell somebody like your baby's a clunker. I'm like, I looked at the sample. That's all I needed to see. You're going to have a hard time. Because even if they can sell the first book, people won't finish it and go on. So accidentally having to be patient because of the time. It wasn't as easy then to get started. So I'm glad that I had at least, because I'm not a super confident person. If there's people whispering as I walk by, I'm like, oh, they're talking about me. They are just trashing me.
Oh, absolutely. At football games, I was convinced when they huddled up, they were talking about me. That's also vanity. That's also vanity. You don't have I have that.
But I was just glad that I had a little confidence, knew by having sold some stuff to those jaded editors out there that the writing was at least okay. So I'm glad I had to go through that and couldn't just go, throw that thing up there that I wrote in 6th grade,
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on today.
We've loved it.
You've been so helpful. And I think that people will really enjoy getting to know you a little bit better. And so tell everybody where they can find you and your books.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. And lindsayburoker.com, or I'm on Amazon and the other stores. If you spell my name anywhere close, usually Google will help you out. There aren't too many others out there. So
Great. Well, thanks for listening. Everybody, you can find show notes at wishihadknownforwriters.com. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
We'll have all Lindsay's stuff in our show notes.
All right. Bye. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.